Welcome, my name is Mark Treadwell and this is the 10th video in a series of video clips that support the resource entitled Learning How the Brain Learns. You can download this free of charge from marktreadwell.com and use that for professional learning across the school. In the last few videos we've been looking at the learning process, and what we're trying to attempt to do here is develop a generic learning process which can be used across any learning situation, essentially a universal learning process. And in this process we have worked through a series of stages, and we talked about those stages through different video clips. We talked about how we build knowledge by using a prompt to cause emotion, which drives our curiosity for us then to ask questions, and from building knowledge to essentially making meaning through the ideas and conceptual framework development, and then applying that understanding through the application of the knowledge, ideas, concept frameworks to actually create innovative and ingenious outcomes using our imagination through the creativity process. So what we're doing in this video is really summing all that up. And what we've done is to create a series of 3 developmental stages for the learning process. And there's 3 developmental stages for the learning process for educators and 3 stages for learners. And really the learner diagrams use the same language as we've used for the educators, but they've been simplified. The diagrams have been simplified so they can actually follow them in a very straightforward manner. In terms of the learning process for educators, the first stage looks at how we actually build knowledge for emergent learners. In other words, we're keeping it fairly straightforward in terms of a framework that builds knowledge, makes meaning, and then applies that understanding. 3 simple stages, and you can see that in the diagram. The second diagram unpacks the making meaning into ideas and concepts. What we want to do that for is because there's quite a distinction between developing ideas and concepts, but it's a conceptual level which requires the development of the first stage that we just saw to come first, and then actually build this stage later on. And so learners can get used to the process and then gradually increase the complexity of the process by taking that making meaning stage and breaking it up and differentiating between ideas and concepts. And what we do there is we take the knowledge and apply that to a context, and then take those ideas and we apply them to numbers of contexts, and that builds our conceptual understanding. And by applying ideas and concepts to needs and opportunities, then we have the capacity to actually be innovative and ingenious. You can see that in the slide that's coming up now. And in this slide, really, we go through that process and identify the stages, and you can go back and look at this in more detail from the resource. In stage 3, we unpack the making meaning process still further and differentiate between ideas, concepts and concept frameworks. And in this third stage, we're really looking to unpack the difference between concepts and conceptual frameworks and see that in fact conceptual frameworks are a merger in our brains of knowledge, ideas and concepts in different ways, shapes and forms. And so we have numerous concept frameworks, and most of our thinking, most of our processing we do on a day-to-day basis is around automated conceptual frameworks. In the next series of 3 stages for educators, what we then put in is the feedback and feed-forward loops. Because the learning process is not a sort of a linear process. It's very, very complex in terms of its predictability. In other words, what we're looking at to begin with is we might build some knowledge from that prompt, which initiates a whole bunch of processes around our emotions and curiosity and building knowledge. We then may develop an idea from that, a relationship between a couple of variables or more, and from that we may actually need to go back and build some more knowledge, and then build another idea, go back and build more knowledge and more ideas, more knowledge, more ideas. and then we may gradually bring those ideas together to form a conceptual understanding, and then we may in fact go back and get some more ideas. That was going to require more knowledge, and so the process is extraordinarily iterative and takes time. And as you can see from the diagrams, what we're doing here is once again developing it from the very simple stage of building knowledge, making meaning and applying understanding, and then we're moving on to the second stage where we break that making meaning into ideas and concepts, and then that third stage where we break the making meaning into ideas, concepts and concept frameworks. But there you can see the feedback loops and the dynamic nature of the learning process. We've also created diagrams for learners, and you can see those coming up soon. And once again, the learners, it's the same process, it's the same language. We've just contracted out some of the intermediary stages, for example, applying to contexts, applying to needs and opportunities. We've taken some of that out to simplify the process so they can be turned into posters and used within the school. All of this material can be placed up on the walls around the room, and the whole plan here really is to allow the learner to have as much agency as possible over their learning. So that's number one, we want that agency, and there are a number of elements that actually underpin the effective implementation of the learning process. So number one is that agency. We want to then also develop the learner's capacity very explicitly across the competencies. We want to make use of prompts in terms of introducing the landscape of actually getting students engaged in learning and wanting to learn and wanting to know and wanting to understand. We need a rich information and communication landscape in terms of ICTs. They're critical. But they shouldn't be the main focus. So they sit in the background, they should be as transparent as possible. The more transparent that technology is, the more effective that technology will be. So it's not focusing on how the technology works, it's making sure the technology does the job of actually allowing learners to facilitate their own learning, record that, get feedback and feed forward from that process. The other thing that's the real biggie is professional learning for educators. We produced this resource and made it available free of charge, essentially because we consider it to be incredibly important that every educator has access to this type of background information underpinning how we now understand the brain to learn and the implications of that in terms of the learning process. So I hope this video is useful. Please go away and use the diagrams freely. You can turn them into posters, you can do whatever you like with them as far as I'm concerned. If you need higher resolution diagrams, etc., please, you can just email me at mark@work.co.nz and we'll send those through to you. Thank you very much.